It's Tiffy time.
And that is all it's going to be.
Toodles!
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to today's episode of For the Love of Wrestling. I am, of course, your host, the Renegade of Wrestling, JJ Williams. How is everybody doing this morning? Is everybody with me? Is everybody awake? Is anybody else dragging the way that I am this morning? Because holy hell, yesterday was an insane day across the entirety of the multiverse of media. So much good stuff now in the archives that you need to go check out if you missed it. Yesterday's For the Love of Wrestling, where I discussed Raw. Dad's Not Always on Wrestling, where Jeff and I ranked the Halloween franchise. Stat Boy Sports Bar featuring Dory Lou. Our coverage of Night 2 of Halloween Havoc. Me and Noah Foster on the call. Talk wrestling. And somehow, some way, I am awake and have enough energy to be sitting here for you guys today. Don't ask me how. I've got my tasty beverage here, my caffeine to help try to wake me up. But we've got a lot to talk about from last night's Halloween Havoc. Let me go ahead and open up my notes. I actually watched this twice yesterday because I watched it live as Noah and I called the action. Thanks to our Multiverse of Media affiliate, James Hebert, for setting it up to where I could watch the live East Coast feed so I could do commentary alongside Noah. And then I watched the West Coast feed so I could take all my notes. Definitely wouldn't put myself through all that if it was a bad show. So that tells you that it definitely was good. Was it as good as week one? That's up for us to all decide. Let's get into it. So NXT last night, Halloween Havoc Night 2 began with the Ecto 1 rolling up outside of the Performance Center. Those of you that are hip to pop culture, you know that the Ecto 1 is the car of the Ghostbusters. Shotzi and Scarlett got out of the car dressed up in Ghostbuster outfits and asked us, who you going to call? We then go inside and we see New Year's Day, the band, performing their song Vampire once again, second week in a row that they performed it. And as they're performing it, they're showing highlights from last week's show, kind of getting us caught up just in case anybody missed anything. Opening match of the night, tables, ladders, and scares, as the Creed brothers, with Ivy Nile, who was dressed up as a Terminator, took on Los Lotharios, Angel Garza, and Hector Carrillo. This was a phenomenal opening matchup. Hard-hitting, intense action throughout. Super Brutus Bomb allowed the Creed brothers to defeat the cousins, Los Lotharios. The Creeds are just on a roll right now, man, between their victory over Alpha Academy on Raw Monday and then this here. The Creeds are just Cameron Grimes style, man. They're heading to the moon. I don't know, though, if they're going to be hanging around NXT and maybe they're pushing them for another run with the tag titles, or if maybe that was their farewell. Because the way they were on the ladder at the end of the match after their victory almost kind of seemed like a farewell type of thing to the NXT crowd. So whether they hang around NXT some more, whether they go to Raw or SmackDown, best of luck to the Creeds. I've been a fan of theirs since I started watching the 2.0 presentation of NXT when I first started to come back into wrestling. We then see Shotzi and Scarlett playing with the Ouija board. Shotzi is dressed as Pennywise. Scarlett is just kind of a basic witch, I think. Like, if I'm being honest, Scarlett's costumes were basic bitch costumes. Like, They weren't anything fancy. They didn't get as elaborate as Shotzi's did. Shotzi's costumes were just chef's kiss the entire time. So they're playing with the Ouija board, and Alba Fire and Isla Dawn make their NXT return. We've seen some video packages on Raw and SmackDown lately, kind of hyping their return and the unholy union coming back, and how the reason that the WWE women's titles seem to be cursed is because they put a spell on the title, which, if you really want to think about it, doesn't make any sense because they weren't around when the belts first came into existence, and the belts have been basically cursed from the jump. But they're playing up the angle that the reason that the belts seem to be cursed is because they placed a spell on them. And of course, tonight we're going to have a WWE Women's Tag Team title match between Chelsea Green, Piper Niven versus Thea Hale and JC Jane representing Chase U. But Alba and Isla are back down in NXT, and they offer to kind of take over the show for Shotzi and Scarlett. You know, they say that they sense a disturbance in the realms, and basically saying that Scarlett and Shotzi need to go back to their realm and let them handle this realm. They allow it, so Alba Fire and Isla Dawn take over the show. They're going to be hosting for the rest of the night, and they say how they want to conjure up some chaos, mischief, and of course, havoc. I agree, Keen Mike. It makes no sense, but considering that their gimmick is witches, I'm sure that's the creative logic behind it. But just the fact that no, they were never around when the belts began kind of makes it silly in the long run. Now, if they had said that while they were NXT Women's Tag Champions, they cursed those belts, and then once the belts got merged with Ronda and Shayna on the main roster, that cursed the women's titles, that would be a little bit more believable. Because Isla and Alba are the ones that lost the belts to Ronda and Shayna to create the unified women's titles. So if they just wanted to reformulate the way that they're trying to tell the story there and add that detail to it, then it would maybe make a little bit more sense. We then get Tiffany Stratton interviewed by Mackenzie Mitchell, and Mackenzie is asking Tiffany to give Fallon Henley just a little bit of credit for her costume last week, where Fallon dressed up like Tiffy, because it was a great costume. It was a good impression. Tiffany gets pissed off, storms off. Then we get a Joe Gacy promo. And we haven't really seen or heard a lot about or from Joe Gacy since the Dyad left, because their contracts expired. Of course, if you follow them on social media, the Dyad back to being the grizzled young veterans. And they are doing amazingly well. Congratulations to them on their successes. After they left, Joe and Ava kind of parted ways, with Joe telling her that this isn't the family that you need to be in, leading us to think that, okay, maybe, even though we all know she's not ready, maybe they'll start to bring Ava towards the main roster in the Bloodline story. Excuse me, I apologize for that. But so we haven't heard a lot from Joe Gacy, and he admitted to doing some heinous things in the past. And we're just going to have to see where this develops and goes in the future. If I'm being honest, I've kind of missed Joe Gacy. While I wasn't a huge fan of the Schism, I never sat under the Schism tree or drank the Gacy Kool-Aid. I did like the presentation and his promo deliveries. And the fact that he hasn't been around for a while, I've kind of really missed that. So I'm glad to see him back. We then got Fallon Henley versus Tiffany Stratton. Fallon comes out to the ring and Tiffany just blindsides her from behind. This match doesn't even have a chance to get underway. Tiffany chucks Fallon into the barricade and then sets her up and locks the figure four on her around the ring post. And that's it. That's the end of this. I get what they were trying to do as far as Tiffy because of how pissed she's been since losing the title to Becky Lynch and Fallon getting on her skin, especially last week with the impersonation. But Tiffany is not badass enough for this to be a believable arc in a storyline. As much as I didn't like it when they did it on Raw either, let me just clarify that. It made a little bit more sense with Xia Li doing that to Candice LeRae than it makes sense doing that the very next day with Tiffany Stratton doing it to Fallon Henley. Give me somebody like Blair Davenport doing that. Maiko Satomura. Gigi Dolan. Even JC Jane. Cora Jade, who's been gone for a while. This is believable. Tiffany Stratton, not so much. We then get the first of 3 video packages featuring the Metaphor, and they are all dressed up like the Scooby-Doo Mystery Machine game. You got Noam Dar in a Scooby-Doo costume. Oro Mensa is Shaggy. You got Lash Legend as Velma, and you got Jakara Jackson dressed up as Daphne. The only one we're missing is a Fred. And I'm actually a little bit surprised that Noam Dar, since he's the leader of Metaphor, wasn't Fred. But later on in the skits, when it's him all alone, we get a Rut-Row like Scooby. So they definitely played into it. But Fred was the only one missing. And basically, they've gone to this haunted house because that is where Akira Tozawa, who had stolen the Heritage Cup last week, took it. Towards the end of the night, we saw, to the end of the night of night 1, let me try and clarify that there. We saw the Metaphor looking at their phone on social media, and there was this image of a haunted house that Tozawa had posted saying, basically, if you want your cup, come and get it. So this whole night is trying to get the Heritage Cup back. And in the first video, we see them approach the haunted house. They're all acting pretty chicken shit. None of them want to go in there. Noam Dar basically has to try to beg them. The gates are locked and then they automatically open on their own. The women are like, screw that. I'm out of here. And Noam Dar basically has to beg them. They get into the house and some monsters are getting, scaring them at every turn. Great jump scares. Then we move on. We'll come back to them again 2 more times over the course of the evening. We then get Nathan Frazier versus Dominic Mysterio for the North American Championship. Now, this was a fast-paced match. Lots of intense action in the contest. Frazier really brought it to Dom here, but Dom was able to overcome thanks to Mommy being at ringside. Hit the frog splash for the victory. There were a couple of little botches in the match, but nothing too drastic. Wasn't really either man's fault. Just a couple of missteps and out of position. There was a couple of like drop kick spots where they barely connect. But they still put on a great match. A lot of people thought Dom was going to lose the belt here. I figured he wasn't. I think Dom will lose it at Deadline. It's the last PLE of the year for the NXT brand. And then going into the brand new year, there will be a new champion. and just kind of build towards Stand and Deliver and WrestleMania weekend. But still, it was a great contest. We then see JC Jane and Andre Chase backstage. JC's kind of telling Andre Chase, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. I helped you get the belts. You won the tag titles last week because of me. Duke and Thea come in, and Thea Hale is back to being the Thea Hale that I love so much, at least for tonight. She's pumped up. She's energetic. She's just rah, screaming and high energy. And Duke says that after tonight, they will no longer be Chase U. They will be Champion University because all four of them will have gold. Tony D'Angelo and Stax come in. JC and Thea take their leave because they have to go get ready for the match. And Tony and Stax start to talk to Andre Chase and Duke and kind of make it seem like maybe Andre Chase made an offer that Tony D couldn't refuse. Andre Chase calls Tony D sir at one point, and Duke overhears and he's like, sir. Duke goes and he takes off, leaving it just Andre and the D'Angelo family. And like I said, there was a little bit of alluding to the fact that maybe Andre Chase made a deal with them in order to get the tag titles. Because Tony D's talking about how Andre Chase owes them a favor. And he's like, oh, yeah, you'll get a rematch for the tag titles. And he's like, oh, yeah, that too. Like, we already know we're getting that. You owe us something else. So I'm going to be curious to see how this plays out. We've thought and we've talked all this time about Thea turning heel because she was starting to go to the darkness. We thought maybe Duke would turn heel 1 year after he joined Chase U. What if Andre Chase is the one that turns heel here? And nobody saw it coming. Keen Mike, that would blow me away if he sold Chase U. That would blow me away. That would be a great twist in the storytelling. We then get Alba Fire and Isla Dawn backstage as Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn, which was the cover photo for today's episode. And they just kind of, nothing really important. They just kind of banter back and forth with each other, having a whole lot of fun being there. We then go back to the haunted house with Metaphor, and they get separated, which, of course, anybody that's seen a scary movie, there's strength in numbers. You know that if you get separated, you're going to get picked off. So they get separated. They get scared. Lash and Jakara get taken off. Tozawa beats the crap out of Oro Mensa, leaving only Noam Dar as we end the second video package of the Metaphor. We then get Mr. Stone versus Braun Breaker. And if you thought that Mr. Stone stood a chance, well, in the words of Bad News Barrett, I'm afraid I have some bad news. Because Braun just destroyed Mr. Stone. Got the victory with the spear. He was about to do to Mr. Stone the same thing he did to Von Wagner when Von Wagner's music hits and he makes the return. He's walking, he's mobile. His head is still bandaged. He is not at 100%. But he was not going to let Braun destroy his friend. So he is out there to make the save as Braun was getting ready to just decapitate Mr. Stone with the steel stairs. Von Wagner almost was able to get some semblance of payback himself by using the stairs onto Braun Breaker, but Breaker was able to evade it and get out of the way, and the match was made for next week. Braun Breaker versus Von Wagner. We then got a video package highlight reel type of video for the Lyra Valkyria and Becky Lynch match last week. Great hype video. They announced that Lyra Valkyria would be back on NXT next week. We then got a Scripts and Out the Mud promo. And this was decent. I'm not sold on OTM just yet, but I do like the way they're presenting them with these video packages. It was good. Scripps talks about, y'all know me as Reggie, but in the streets, back home they call me Scripts. And how he found these guys that, have the similar backstory as him, Just look up the video package on social media. It'll be done more justice if you watch it than me saying it. I agree, Mikey. I enjoyed Sky Blue's Mystery Machine inspired gear better, but these four were actually dressed as the characters, where her gear was inspired by the van. We then got our women's tag team title match as Chelsea Green and Piper Niven defend the titles against the women of Chase U, JC Jane, and Thea Hale. Fantastic women's match. This match made up for Tiffany Stratton versus Fallon Henley earlier in the night. It made up for Candice LeRae and Xia Li on Raw. It made up for Natalya versus Chelsea Green on Raw. This was a great presentation of women's tag team wrestling. Piper Niven really helped make Thea look like $1,000,000. Thea and JC attacked Piper right out the gate. They knew she was the bigger person, the stronger person, the more dangerous person on the team. So they tried to take her out of action right out the gate. And they were successful for a little bit. But once Piper got back into the ring and into the match, man, it was just on. Piper was doing her thing. Chelsea was doing her thing. And everybody was just clicking perfectly. Chelsea hit the Unpretty Her for the victory. They retained the title. There was a point towards the end there where JC tried to grab Andre's Chase, his championship, Andre Chase's title belt, to use to help the girls become champions. And Andre grabbed it and pulled it away, saying, "No, you do it on your own." And this was the distraction necessary for Chelsea to be able to hook JC up for the Unpretty Her and get defeated. So Andre Chase once again cost the girls championship, because first time he threw the towel in on Thea Hale when she was challenging Tiffany Stratton for the women's title. And now he cost the girls the tag titles. On top of the fact that he owes some favors now to Tony D. This kind of plays into my theory that maybe it's going to be Andre Chase that turns heel. And I'm definitely curious to see what happens from here. We then had Mackenzie Mitchell backstage with Lexis Keene for his first interview. Of course, Lexis Keene, the former Brian Pillman Jr. And he is sitting on his throne. And he's being a little cocky, a little arrogant, a little egocentric. How does it feel to be giving me my first interview? And he talks about, what he's done so far in just one short week, what's to come. Keep your eyes on me because you won't believe what I have in store. We then go to the finals of the women's breakout tournament. And it's Keilani Jordan versus Lola Vice. And some of you may recall, I picked this to be my final from the jump before I even knew who the brackets were going to be. Before I even knew all the women entered, I said, Keilani Jordan and Lola Vice are going to be your finals. And here they are. I picked Kaylani Jordan to win. However, if you heard me on commentary last night, I did say that with Lyra Valkyria, a babyface now as the champion, I wouldn't be surprised if Lola wins. And Lola Vice indeed did win the breakout tournament. Both women laid it all on the line. This is another fantastic women's match. Again, making up for the abysmal performances on Raw. Thanks to a distraction from Elektra Lopez, who's kind of been Lola Vice's running buddy, Lola was able to pick up the victory on Kaylani. So not a clean victory per se. And the fact that it did take the distraction for the victory, but nonetheless, Lola Vice is your breakout women's tournament champion, and she will get a title shot against Lyra Valkyria. Probably going to be at Deadline. I don't know if they're going to hot shot it. We've got a few weeks before Deadline, but we're also going to have the Iron Survivor tournament to see who's going to be in the Iron Survivor matches come Deadline. So I'm not sure if they're going to try to squeeze that match in before Deadline or not. I hope they don't. I'd like to see it saved for the pay-per-view so we can do some steady build-up for these girls. Because right now, aside from the fact that Lola Vice won the tournament, there's no reason for them to fight. There's no history, there's no feud, there's no animosity. We need some time to build and tell a story here. We then go back to the metaphor at the haunted house. Noam Dar finds his Heritage Cup finally, and the monsters kind of come in and start to surround him. He begins to cry for Tozawa to call them off, and Akira Tozawa appears. He challenges Noam Dar to a match for the Heritage Cup. And at first, Noam Dar tells him no. So he tells the monsters to get him. And the monsters start to get Noam Dar, and he concedes, tells them, fine, next week on the show, you'll get your shot at the Heritage Cup. And so Tozawa calls the monsters off, goes to leave, and next week we're going to get that Heritage Cup match on NXT. See, we got here. Mike says, I like the Iron Survivor match. It's an excellent concept. I agree. And we were told on the show that come next week, some WWE Hall of Famers are going to determine which competitors are going to compete to see who gets a shot in the Iron Survivor match. If I remember last year, it was 5 people per match. So we'll probably have, 10 competitors, 20 total because women and men's, trying to see who's going to get that shot. A couple of matches each week to build up to it so that by the time we get to the show on December 9th, we have our field. You figure we've got 5 shows between now and the pay-per-view, the PLE. So if a man and a woman have one qualifying match each week, then by the time we get to December 4th, that'll be the 5th week and the final person to qualify heading into the PLE. Perfectly structured, I think. We then see Carmelo Hayes backstage as he's heading to the ring for his match. We get another Alba Fire and Isla Dawn promo backstage. Kind of having some more fun here, the two girls. We got Mr. Stone and Von Wagner backstage. And Von Wagner, this is where he's telling Mr. Stone, I want you to get this match made for me. Now, I already said earlier, we're going to get that match next week. So this is where Von Wagner is telling him, look, you're my manager, you're my friend, but I need you to get this done for me. Mr. Stone gets it done. And then we have our main event. Carmelo Hayes versus Ilya Dragunov, Part 3. Another banger of a match. There was another couple of botches here. There was a spot where Mello tried to bounce off the middle rope and float back to hit like a DDT or something, and Dragunov was just out of position, so he ended up landing and not executing the move. Again, simple botches, no one's fault really botches, just a little bit out of position. But even that notwithstanding, these two men have had incredible chemistry. Every match that they've put on has been a classic. This one would probably be ranked a little bit lower, like I said, because of the botches, but still, just a phenomenal match. Mello goes up to the top. He's going to hit the nothing but net. Trick Williams' music hits, and he starts to come out. And he's got a cold expression on his face. It's enough where Ilya is able to get the victory off of it because Mello is distracted. Torpedo Moscow for the victory. Ilya Dragunov retains his title. And Trick continues to come to the ring. And it looks like Trick helps Mello up, but we're not really sure of Trick's motives. And before we can find out what Trick's motives are, we cut to the backstage area because something's going on, and Baron Corbin has attacked and beaten down Ilya Dragunov. Probably setting up that to be a match in the coming weeks here on television. But I'm a little bit bummed and upset that we didn't get a little bit more in the Trick Mello story. I feel like something was about to happen and didn't because of the backstage attack. So while I wanted to see what was going to happen, I also can't get too terribly mad because it's great booking. Now I'm going to have to tune in next week to see what happens more in the story. I think is very well put together. But that is NXT Halloween Havoc. Excuse me, night 2. Another fantastic show. I will say I don't think it was as good as last week's show. But I give it a solid B. Solid B, B+ for this week's show. I thought it was good. The only things that really held it down, in my opinion, were the Tiffany Stratton, Fallon Henley thing. And I feel like they did too much with the metaphor in the haunted house. 2 segments, okay. 3, I felt was a little bit much. Curious to know what you guys thought. Let me know in the comments. I'm going to run 2 very brief commercials, each one about 40 seconds. So we're going to be gone for less than a minute and a half. Going to run these couple of trailers showing you what's ahead for more future watch-alongs across the Jeff Meacham Network Multiverse of Media, and where you can find and follow all of the affiliates within the Jeff Meacham Network. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Any comments or thoughts that haven't already been shown, post them in the comments, and I'll bring them up afterwards. If you have any questions, super chat, simple as that. We'll be right back. Lots of stuff coming up as far as watch-alongs go across the multiverse of media, kicking off this Friday with Impact Wrestling Turning Point. And then we've got Crown Jewel the following day. So much more stuff coming up. Again, follow everybody within the multiverse of media. You got Statboy Mike and Statgirl Dory Lou, Josh Mansfield, Big Baller G Datilla, Noah Foster, James Hebert, myself, Greg Cherry, No DQ, the boss man, Jeff Meacham himself. So much more. Make sure you follow all those people. And it looks like there's no more questions or comments or anything like that. So I am going to go ahead and take my leave here today. Make sure you guys tune in tomorrow. Same bad time, same bad channel when I cover AEW Dynamite. And until then, thank you guys for joining me and tuning in today. And I will see you guys next time.
The Jeff Meacham Network's Multiverse of Media. For over 15 years, the recognized symbol of excellence and the standard bearer in coverage of sports and entertainment.
Thank you, JJ. Appreciate you.